For TV.
Welcome back to Doctor Who Too Hot for TV. We are the podcast that looks at all things Doctor Who Extended Universe. And today I'm joined by what can only be described as the oncoming storm. It's Mr. Michael Storm. Michael, how are you?
Hello, Jill. It's nice to be on the show. I'm radiant, and how are you?
I am wonderful. It's fantastic to have you here talking about two things that are related to each other. One of which I have consumed before many times, and one it was my first time. So why don't you tell everybody what you've come to talk about today?
Okay, I've come on here to talk about the past Doctor adventure featuring the Fourth Doctor and Leela, Corpse Marker. It's written by Chris Boucher, and it's a sequel to not only the Doctor Who story The Robots of Death, but a pseudo-sequel to an episode of Blake 7. The episode in question being Weapon, as it features the character of Carnell, played by the late great Scott Fredericks.
Of course, and it's set in the world of Caldor City, which is somewhere else we'll be visiting later on.
And indeed, it lays up the foundations for where we're going,
which is a Storm Mine from the Caldor City range of audios.
Yes, and that is sort of like a coda to the series, and it's a bit of a meta. It's kind of like a meta ending. It's like Fallout is to The Prisoner, as it goes a bit.
It all goes a bit bizarre, but we'll get into that ending later on. But first, I must come to you and ask you how you became a Doctor Who fan.
Well, I'm going to is that it's probably been in my life ever since I was a wee little lad back in the 1980s. My first actual memory of Doctor Who is from Paradise Towers, but it's a bit of a weird, mashed-up memory, because I remember the scenes in the TARDIS with Mel waxing lyrical about the swimming pool, but for some reason my memory had that set in the broom cupboard from children's CBBC. So I'm dating myself there. And I remember a lot of the visuals. I remember the cleaners with the Kangs and various people's limbs hanging out the back of the bins. I remember the resis being attacked through the waste disposal unit, particularly, and the cleaner in the swimming pool. Of course, my little 5-year-old memory seems to remember thinking that was a giant thing coming out of the swimming pool, not this tiny little float bobbling along. But I say it's really from season 25 onwards. I have pretty strong memories of pretty much all of season 25, most of season 26. But I have a feeling my memories are a bit off on 26 because I remember the cliffhanger to Battlefield Part 2 being Part 1. Which makes me think is that I'd probably missed Part 1 because we had gone shopping or something like that. And I remember watching The Curse of Fenric on the black and white portable in my bedroom because I've been sent upstairs for being naughty.
Brilliant. So obviously season 26 comes along and Doctor Who finishes, but obviously we head into the Wilderness era and there's a plethora of Doctor Who spin-offs. Do you have a relationship with Doctor Who beyond the television show, and what was the first thing you consumed there? Well,
so obviously the first thing I did was I spent a huge amount of time going through the video range and hiring up the Target books from my local library. But what it was going to say, once I started getting into secondary school, I did attempt to read Cat's Cradle Times Crucible when I was in the last year of primary school. I remember it quite distinctly. It was a sponsored reading, and I started trying to read the book, which I'd purchased in Portsmouth. And I was reading it again. What the? What? It was definitely too much for my 10, 11-year-old mind.
Yeah. I remember that disappointment of picking up New Adventures and Missing Adventures and thinking, oh, brilliant, brand new Doctor Who, and being 10, 11, whatever, and them just being impenetrable.
I think a few years later, I think I picked up, it was probably a birthday or Christmas gift, it was Evolution by John Peel, which got an absolute slating in Doctor Who magazine, but when it was about maybe like 12, 13, it was absolutely fine. It read like a Target. It felt, I was reading a Target book of a story which never happened, which when you're 12 and 13, I think is what you were wanting.
Absolutely. There's a few that I remember getting into at 12 or 13 and thinking, oh, God, this is brilliant. And now knowing that they've got, even a little later down the line with the 8th Doctor range, thinking the 8 Doctors was brilliant because I was 13 years old or whatever. So it was just, I was the exact age for that sort of release. But everybody else was like, oh, no, I don't want this. I want another Lung Barrow.
So I was a little too young for the New Adventures, but I started getting into the range at the tail end of the range. I think the first one I properly read was Christmas on a Rational Planet by Lawrence Miles. It did take me to attempt, so I hasten to add. And I think I'd read a couple of the Missing Adventures in the meantime. I think Eye of the Giant and System Shock. So I started reading Christmas on the Rational Planet, found it a bit tough, and then read The English Way of Death, which I quite enjoyed. Then went back to Christmas on the Rational Planet. I think I got myself into a groove then, and pretty much I followed most of the New Adventures. Then on to the end of the run. The only ones I didn't get were Lungbarrow, The Dying Days, and Eternity Weeps. And the only one I don't have is Dying Days.
One day.
And I only got Lungbarrow because my ex-partner bought it for me for Christmas once as her contribution to her half of the holiday. The holiday went on. And he said it's the most he's ever spent on a book.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, New Adventures. Did you get into the Big Finish audios, things like that? Like, what brings us to both Corpse Marxer and Storm Mine? Because neither of those are perhaps the most obvious sort of choices of sort of periphery spin-offery. Spin-offery? We're going with that. Why not?
Spin-offery. We'll put it in the dictionary. Because basically the 8 Doctors range became my range of the BBC books became my range of books. Because I was 13, 14, I was just getting into that age when I started reading them, so that was my series of Doctor Who. So I'd follow them up. I'd pretty much buy them each month once they got going. I think there's a few of the early ones I didn't get at the time, so I was still picking and choosing, because you thought 14 don't have that much disposable income, so then I started getting part-time jobs, and I was like, I'm going to buy a Doctor Who book, I'm going to buy a Doctor Who book. So, well, one of the things Corpse Marker is, I remember I purchased this at Battlefield 3 convention must have been in the month of publication, which was a big convention up in Coventry in the Leo Frick Hotel, which is...
I was there.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah, I was.
It's a small world.
It is. And I'm gathering from this we're about the same age. So, I think I was probably behind you going, some bastards bought the Corpse Marker I wanted to buy.
Probably. I just remember being very badly badgered by Bill Baggs to try and buy it on 3.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Although I did get, he did get Michael Wade to sign it. So.
Have you still got it?
I think I have, yes.
Excellent. So the 8th Doctor range, the BBC Books range, was your range of books. The show comes back in 2005, and these things sort of slide into as sort of distant memories. Are you someone that's stuck with things like Doctor Who books, comics, audios, things like that since the show came back?
Yes and no. I think I found a Big Finish for a bit, but eventually it just got, oh dear, this is just catching up with all the releases, and it was too expensive. It was getting too expensive and too confusing, and too, well, if I want to buy this, I want to buy this. I just want to. It's when they stopped doing the ongoing 8th Doctor range. I think I really thought, I'm just gonna pick and choose now.
Yeah, fair. And also, you'd have to be a multi-millionaire to be able to afford everything they do on a monthly basis now.
Yeah, so I think the last regular one I bought, I think, was Nocturne.
That was a fair while ago now.
Yeah, so now I might have. Oh my God, I might have got a few of the later, some of the when they redesigned the covers. I might have subscribed a little bit. So yes, I think I got the Christopher H. Bidmead Dalek story, which he took his name off. Yes, I think I just dipped in and out though from then on. New series books, I bought a couple of them when they came out, but they're clearly. I think it's to the point of if they'd come out when I was 14, 13, I'd probably again lap them up.
Yeah.
But I thought looking as a cynical, miserable person, I thought these seem a little too kiddie for me. They're clear.
Yeah. We were the wrong age at all the wrong times, you know.
Yeah, but on the other hand, they sold really well by the bucket load for the kids, so they must they got the market. But some of them they just felt like generic tie-in novels, and I mean, there's the odd really stand out like The Eyeless by Lance Parkin. Hat tip to Joe Ford, he pointed me at that one. I quite liked Forever Autumn, though I thought the ending was a bit of a cop out. And there's The Shining Man by Kevin Scott. That's quite a good one. But then I picked up some of the big chunky hardback books, like with named authors like Dad Abnett, Alistair Reynolds, and Michael Moorcock, which is an interesting read.
Too hot for TV.
So, should we jump into Corpse Marker then?
Yeah, I think we shall, yes.
Okay, so Corpse Marker was written by Chris Boucher for BBC Books. It was released on the 29th of November 1999. News at the time. BBC Two were about to commence repeating Doctor Who, starting with the Spearhead from space, but skipping things like the Ambassadors of Death and the Mind of Evil, Planet of the Daleks, and Invasion of the Dinosaurs, because no black and white. We've gone past the point where black and white is a sellable commodity, and their plan was to repeat it all the way through, but unfortunately, by the time they got to the Silurians, they'd skip forward to Tom Baker, and a few weeks later, it was all done. Sad, sad times. And the big headline in DWM that month was, Is the Who movie dead? In late October, industry sources close to the much-vaunted prospective Doctor Who motion picture indicated that the prospective co-producers Impact Films have pulled out. Impact producer Jeremy Bolt of late September revealed a number of hitherto unknown details, including that the plot was going to feature the Doctor's arch enemy, the renegade Time Lord, the Master, but the casting process had not begun. The company had previously backed the Blair Witch Project, and it was looking at around a feature film of about $40 million. But ultimately that didn't happen. And a little footnote in the news is there was a potential series on the horizon penned by Queer as Folk writer Russ T. Davis, known as Doctor Who 2000. Unfortunately, it was nothing more than a little headline, and it turns out, years later, a tiny little meeting. But those were the days, eh?
So I remember DWN articles like, no news yet!
And indeed, there was no news for about another 3 years. Other releases at the time from Big Finish, we had The Whispers of Terror, featuring the Sixth Doctor and Perry. Elsewhere, we had A Critical History of Doctor Who on Television, which was an academic book. BBC Two broadcast the Doctor Who Night, an evening of episodes, documentaries and comedy sketches, with introduction and skits by Tom Baker. Planet of the Daleks and Revelation of the Daleks were released in a snazzy little tin together. The comic strip was Company of Thieves with the Eighth Doctor and Izzy, and the the Eighth Doctor novel was Frontier Worlds, featuring Compassion. Remember any of those releases?
I don't remember the comic strip. I probably read it, but I just can't remember a thing about it.
I don't either. I think it's one of those ones that isn't, it isn't the big arc stories, so perhaps it just slips up. I'm sure it's great, though.
I think it was a short. My memory is it was only about 2 parts, so it might have just been a little bit. I read Frontier Worlds because I was reading the ongoing arc, and I think it got quite high in the DWM poll. And with somebody suggesting, why don't they should make a movie of Frontier Worlds and get Robbie Williams to play Fitz.
Wow.
Thinking, what? Do you want people to hate this film?
Well, do you know the other time that Robbie Williams was nearly cast in Doctor Who?
No, I don't.
Scream of the Schalke. They approached him first because apparently he was a fan, but he couldn't do it. So we could have had BBC I, Scream of the Schalke, starring Robbie Williams as the Doctor.
Jesus Christ. That would have been... unique.
It would. I mean, would it have been better or worse than Scream of the Schalke? Who can say?
I suppose not. We shall never know.
Too hot for TV.
Threatened by upstarts from the common classes, such as top master Kiv Ivanov, company executives hire Carnell, a noted psychostrategist, to devise a plan to undermine the people's trust in the current generation of robots, allowing the company to introduce a new cyborg class with minimum fuss and ensuring the panic-stricken populace will accept the stability offered by the traditional ruling families. However, Carnell fails to factor the Doctor and Leela's presence into account, and the plan soon goes completely wrong. As the executives who hired Carnell are now out to make him a scapegoat, he strikes a deal with Ivanov, giving Ivanov the leverage he needs to ensure a smooth transfer of power to him and his followers. This synopsis was taken from TARDIS Wiki.
Too hot for TV.
Presumably you came to this at the time. You bought it from that convention, Battlefield 3.
Yes, I did. Yes, and I can't remember if I started this one on the way home on the train, or if I started Frontier Worlds, or which one. But I certainly read it shortly after I purchased it, and it was definitely an improvement on Chris Boucher's previous novel, Last Man Running, which is just incomprehensible and just incredibly dull. It picks up, it's. So this is actually uniquely, it's about the only PDA I've read 3 times.
Okay.
So once the original release, and once I took it as reading material, went on holiday on a Caribbean holiday to the island of Cuba, and I read it there.
Are you the only person in Cuba to have ever read Corpse Marker? I think so.
Very probably, unless I don't know. Maybe it was on Fidel's bed cabinet. Every night I'll go and read a bit of Corpse Marker.
I think it's possible.
Yeah, him and Rob were arguing over whether or not Iago is Avon or not.
I've never read this before. I definitely owned it at some point, but it sat on a shelf, and then I think I sold it, and then I bought it again when I bought all of the past Doctor adventures, so I was coming to this fresh. Now, we live in an era where every Doctor Who story gets a sequel, or 5 sequels, who knows. We see a cow and we milk it dry. But it wasn't necessarily the case at this point, and every time a sequel to something happened, it was a big deal. So my question to you is, at this particular time, forgetting all the stuff we've had since, was Robots of Death something that was crying out for a sequel?
No, it wasn't. I think it was a very self-contained story. It didn't really seem to me that there was anywhere really to go from what we had. It was, the story's over, we've got a bunch of characters who don't really like each other, they've come together. Okay, you can maybe explore the fallout. You might have a short story out of it, I would have thought, but I didn't think there was room for a full-length novel.
I think there's, especially from, the Hinchcliffe and Holmes era is sort of revered, and I think one of the most successful things is having these stories with a beginning, a middle, and end that are these self-contained stories. They're not reliant on continuity. And you meet people for 4 episodes or 6 episodes, you disappear, and we never see them again. But I can understand why, to fans of that era especially, it's so tempting to revisit these characters and these places, as we often do. There is one mention, though, that I don't think the story needed a sequel necessarily, but the mention of Caldor City has obviously somehow sat in the brains of fans for many years. With the promise of this whole world beyond this desert. So we do revisit the characters and indeed Caldor. Does this Caldor feel like a city that might have spawned Robots of Death?
Yes, it does. I think that it is that it's very much the idle rich and their servants, and it very much boils down to a society full of rich people ignoring everybody else, just looking for their next fix of whatever it is through wealth, through power. There's clearly political power structures, so I can see exactly how this society could exist and how the fall of Taran Capel and the invention of and deprogramming the robots will come about. Because essentially the robots are slaves, and Taran Capel sees himself as as the slave freer. He's the Joan of Arc of robots. He thinks he's Lincoln.
Yeah. And so we do get a number of characters from the Robots of Death. Where do we find these characters? Where are they in their lives? What have they been up to?
Well, Poole has pretty much spent the rest of his post Robots of Death life being slightly psychotic and wandering around in a job he can't really do, but he's being paid off to keep quiet, and everyone just thinks he's a twitching moron. Toos is just pursuing her gratification for high levels of wealth. She just wants to get rich. But she's also got PTSD and is still traumatized by the robots and frequently switches them off. And the only reason she is still employed by the company is because she brings such good yields back from the desert. And Ivanov, he's trying to get himself into Keldor society, into the structure, because it's very much based on the founding families, which he has a very strong distaste about, clearly established in Robots of Death, and he's working himself through the system to put himself in a position of power. He's also incredibly paranoid, partially because of robots. He's seeing enemy agents everywhere. This is something which, of course, built up in the Caldor City series. But he plays a little game at one point of the novel where he calls somebody out for being a spy. Doesn't actually know this, but it turns out he is correct. So maybe he's. And the setup is that Carnell from the Blake Severson episode Weapon, which you probably should read a summary of if you've not seen it before you read the novel. Is setting up Poole to look like he's murdered a load of people, but it's really a series of robots, because the founding families do not want people to know that robots can kill, and those are the only witnesses.
Excellent. And do these feel like the same characters from Robots of Death? Like, would you expect to find them in this place? Did you want to find them in this place?
Poole, I definitely could see would be in that position where he's just a bit loony. I think Toos, it might be slightly undercharacterised. Aside, it never struck me as being a vain rich bitch, but
no, that was the one for me that I was like, yeah, I can believe this is Ivanov, I can believe this is Poole, but Toos, I would expect there was something slightly more moral about her, and I don't think it explored enough what happened to her to change her, to this sort of selfish money grabber who, just sort of wants out of the life that is this vain, as you say, vain rich bitch.
She's taken this route so she gets enough money so she can be alone and doesn't have to have any robots, doesn't have to interact with anybody anymore.
Yeah. It's very single-minded, but I don't know. I felt the character was too compassionate in the story, in Robots of Death, to sort of end up in this place. Like, the events of Robots of Death may have been traumatic, but I don't think they were that traumatic. No,
whereas I think Ivanov, he has a chip in his shoulder in Robots of Death. He clearly has still grown longer, and he feels perfectly in character. And of course, as does his development as we go into Caldor City.
Indeed. And so you mentioned the robots. How are the robots handled here compared to Robots of Death?
I mean, one of the biggest flaws that Chris Boucher has here is that he doesn't have the visual element, and their elegant designs are one of the things which made Robots of Death so memorable, with their ever so relaxed, posh voices, monotone voices, and their rather elegant looks. So he's had to approach it differently. So there's some interesting ideas like the stop dumbs, which how do you secure somebody when your robots can't physically attack someone? You just keep getting in their way all the time. It's quite a clever idea. And then we get onto the cyborg classes, which is interesting because from their initial appearance, you get seeds that the artificial intelligence is being born. Is that they see the Doctor and he imprints on them duck-like. So they start copying his eating a jelly baby, chewing all the time. which is a point which is made several times by various characters in the book. As it goes on.
You make a really good point about not having the visuals or the sound. And I think perhaps I missed out on that slightly because I listened to the audiobook, which is on Spotify if anybody wants to listen to it, if you've got Spotify Premium. So it was David Collins doing the voiceover, which is obviously fantastic because he's in it. But also he knew the Robots of Death voices. So I got those voices and it hadn't occurred to me how that might not land on the page, I guess. It's a bit like reading about a weeping angel.
Yeah, it loses some. So I listened to the audiobook as well because I listened to it on my commute as well, and it was he gets the voices right, but he gives a lot of the characters a lot of individual sounds, which I think helps it because the prose style Chris Boucher employs at this point is not the easiest to penetrate. Yeah. And I think we need to sell him a few commas at some points because there seems to be large passages of text. So you think, okay, I could do with a comma at some point.
Yeah, I mean, again, listening to it, it wasn't quite the commas and stuff like that because obviously David Collins has had to put some in due to breathing and being an actor and all this stuff. But there was something a little off about the prose. That's the only way I can describe it. Like, it wasn't quite as... It was never quite as elegant as I wanted it to be in places. It was never quite as visceral as I wanted it to be in places. It was just... It felt like a first draft and that he'd written himself notes to come back and emote more here later or something and never got a chance.
The feeling I got is that this is a guy who is not yet used to writing prose, so he's writing it like stage directions. So he'd write it, this is how it would look on screen, this is what they're doing. Oh, I better describe what they're doing. And it felt like that. It was felt like notes for a director to interpret.
Yeah, or an actor to go, am I angry here? Am I sad? Yeah. And perhaps Collins' narration helped a little bit there because he was able to map things onto certain characters, and he did a great Leela, I think, and quite a good Doctor and stuff. But yeah, it was a little bit like... I didn't feel like I was reading a fully formed novelist when I was listening to it.
No, I mean, I think some of the characterisation of some of the supporting characters is a bit thin. For example, Kaleo Teclan, who seems, I think she's supposed to be a bit one note. I think the idea is that she's supposed to be a bit one note because she's undercover, but and she's just pretending to be undercover because occasionally says her monotone voice suddenly changed. And again, that sounds like a stage direction.
And you look at the characters that he creates in, Caldor City, and I know obviously you've got other people like Alan Stevens with their influence all over it, but there's a lot of characters involved in that world that some of them are his, some of them are Alan Stevens, some of them are, whoever's writing at the time. And you think, okay, the actor and the director's brought a lot more to this. And also it's a more collaborative process. There's probably chats between the writers and the directors, and Chris Boucher is sort of the executive producer, if you will. And they create these things together, whereas this is just... I imagine it's him not being 100% confident with the prose, hurtling towards a deadline and just having a one editor.
Yeah, I think, so Steve Cole editing both ranges at the time, so he was probably putting more focus on the 8th Doctor range, because of ongoing story arcs and whatnot.
And I think Cole's probably going, well, Chris Boucher wrote some classic Doctor Who's, so I can just leave him to it.
Yeah. And I think it was so interview with Chris Boucher, they said, well, why do you always write for the 4th Doctor and Leela? He said, well, I know who they are, I don't have to do any research to do different ones. Which is, that sounds about, I can see that's somebody who doesn't want to do a lot of effort into his work. No, that sounds wrong, but it sounds like he likes to work within a familiar framework.
Yeah, which is understandable.
And, so his following novel, I think this following on science fiction, that was a massive upstep in terms of prose style and how the story develops as well. But that's a completely different podcast.
Maybe we'll be back next year doing that one as well.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the villain of the piece. Who is this villain? Who's behind it all?
Oh, well, this is where it gets a bit complicated. You could identify at least 3 different villains depending on your point of view. The principal villain is the SAS V1, the Serial Access Supervalk, who is supposed to be a robot who control... It's not just the one in charge, but he can upgrade robots, he can manipulate, control, reassign robots to function in a particular way, who develops a personality and during his upgrades. And it takes the tech team to far too long for them to realise, okay, there's something a bit strange going on here, because he started dreaming. And they just thought it was electrical processes in his brain. But he becomes self-aware, and he decides he is Taran Capel.
Yes, so he's found the blueprints for Taran Capel's... No, he was built using the blueprints found in Taran Capel's cabin on Storm Mine 4. And as a result, he thinks he is Taran Capel. And you're sort of there going, oh, well, he's going to turn out to be Taran Capel, aren't you, for a while?
But then he also has a duality problem, because Poole has incorrectly identified the Doctor as being Taran Capel, because his brain's all scrambled. And that's gone through the various robots who fed back to the Syriacs of Supervoc, and therefore he's got a duality problem, is that there can't be two Taran Capels, so one of them has to be got rid of. And that means he can control these cyborg robots onto a killing spree, because they're closely related to his technology, so they're the first ones who get influenced. But the programming does go through the Supervox, the Vox, the Dumbs. And the other potential villain, you could argue that Ivanov's a villain as well, because he's trying to manipulate the situation to his favour, and he's not afraid to use a few terrorist acts to wander his way.
See, this is what I like most about the story, is there isn't necessarily an out-and-out villain. There are lots of people with lots of different agendas, and it shows sort of what a corrupt world that Caldor City actually is. And it is just a lot of people. Yeah, there's just a lot going on. And as you say, you can argue X is the villain, Y is the villain. Obviously, there are people out there killing people, but people kill you get the impression people kill each other all the time in this world. It's what you do to screw people over and to get one up on them.
Yes, it's very much a dog-eat-dog world. And then we get the whole thing of the sewer pits, which is an interesting setup, which I don't think fully realises its potential, because we keep getting this threat of the sewer pits.
Yeah.
And it's well over 2/3 into the book until we finally get there, and even then we only get hints of why are the sewer pits so bad. We get references to basically murder, cannibalism, whatever it is. You stand around on the street for too long on your own, you're going to get killed, robbed, and all sorts of nasty things that happen to you. And then it turns out the sewer pits is in fact a big trap for the robots, which go rogue. Which just begs the question: if this has happened before, why are they continuing to use robots? Or is this the founding families making sure that they keep the cycle going to make sure they're the ones in charge?
Oh, interesting. I think it's probably the latter. We talked about Carnell a little bit at the beginning, but how does Carnell fit into all this?
Well, Carnell is manipulating the events. He has set up this perfect scenario for the founding families, to which they can get themselves free of blame, get rid of all the witnesses to what happened on Storm Mine 4, so they can continue their robot classes and introduce their new cyborg robots, which at the time of the story is set are still illegal in Caldor City. There has to be a distinction between a human and a robot. So technically speaking, the cyborgs are actually androids rather than robots, because...
Very true. Do we like Doctor Who and Blake 7 crossing over?
Yeah, I don't think they're really as compatible as people think they are.
No. I think they're compatible in a lot of people's minds because they represent their childhood.
Yeah,
but
I mean...
Like you say, the Broom Cupboard and Paradise Towers were about at the same time, and they may exist slightly in your mind as the same thing, but they're very different.
Oh, yes. But yes, if it's a story like Kate Androzani, I can say, yeah, that happens I can see that story happening in the Blake 7 universe.
Yeah.
But then you're thinking, okay, if the Kate, can you imagine Delta and the Bannerman taking place in the Blake 7 universe?
Not quite. Or Keys of Marinus. Like, it's not the same world.
No, Blake 7 is a nasty visceral world which For ease and convenience, the government get rid of their opponents by brainwashing children to think they've been sexually assaulted by them. So, yes, that really fits in with your tea time Doctor Who, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this of Doctor Who and Blake Seven crossing over, but I can deal with it in this very minute way, and I guess we'll get into that a bit more with Stormmire in a bit. But before we get there, I need to know about. How do you feel about how the Fourth Doctor and Leela are handled in this? Is it recognisably them? Do they feel like they've just stepped out the robots of death?
I think the Fourth Doctor comes across quite strong. I'm not quite so sure about Leela. He's Chris Boucher's really dug into the savage side and instinct. But I'm fairly certain that Leela in this story is spelled Killer. And if this is how Boucher originally pitched the character, I can actually see why Tom Baker was objecting to her. Because she does seem to have a sort of urge to go. Does seem to have this sort of urge to stab lots of people, and I know it does pick that up in the Williams era a bit because she's a little bit more caricature there, but certainly with Hinchcliffe and Imogen Fendal. She's inquisitive, she's intelligent, inquisitive. She's just uneducated because she's from a Stone Age society. But she's not. And she's using her instinct, but she's using her brain as well. And I sometimes think he's gone noble savage a bit too far. I thought, oh, hang on, she's supposed to be thinking it. Then she thinks things which are a bit too complicated for her.
Yeah. This is Leela almost straight out of The Jungle and Face of Evil, isn't it? It's like she spent no time with the Doctor. But even by the end of Robots of Death, you feel like the Doctor and Leela's relationship has sort of they've grown to attach to each other, and Leela's learned from him that you don't solve everything with violence. So it does feel like a step back.
Yeah, it makes me wonder how far from in their personal journey is this supposed to be set. On the back cover of the original book, it says it's set after the Talons of Wen Chiang, but that doesn't feel right to me. Yes, Last Man Running is very, very much feels like she's just come out the jungle. Whereas perhaps if this had been set shortly after the robot's death, before Talons, it might sit a little better because Leela's a bit more intuitive and much more intelligent and much more keen to learn in Talons of Wen Chiang than she appears to be here.
Would we say this is a successful sequel?
Well, it depends what you wanted from the Robots of Death, I think.
Does it take the elements we know and do something new, build on the ideas, or is it very much like repeat it but on land?
No, it does do development, but what it does seem to do, though, is it appears to be a sequel to is reuse parts of the Face of Evil. When I was reading, I was thinking about SASV1, Taron Capel, I was thinking, wait a minute, isn't that what happens to Zoanon in Face of Evil? And it's something similar, that he becomes sense of identity, thinks himself omnipotent, and then starts getting rid of everyone who questions his identity and challenges his sense of self.
Well, if you've got a good idea, you might as well milk it. Stephen Moffat did.
Terry Nation. And to be fair, Robert Holmes as well.
Yeah.
And if we're going into quote unquote serious drama, Dennis Potter.
Very true. Yeah. So I don't like. I think sometimes people are unkind to modern Doctor Who writers specifically about reusing ideas. When we see, Robert Holmes has peddled Androzani a few times before we even get there, and this is Chris Boucher reusing an idea 20-odd years later.
And how many times has Robert Holmes reused Death to the Daleks Part 4? We've run out of story. Oh, we'll just do this bit again. Pyramid to Mars, Hand of Fear.
Couple of corridors, couple of games, couple of impossible problems that are quite easy to solve. Do you have much more you want to say on this one?
I think the problem is, what I find I don't know if there's a few set pieces, but can you remember much about the novel?
No, I found I think if I was reading this as opposed to listening, I would have struggled a little bit with it. But because it was an audio reading read by someone with a fantastic voice, and a great delivery. I was a bit more into it, but I find myself. I mean, we were supposed to do this about a month ago originally, so I'd finished it then, and given a month's gap, I'm a little bit hazy. As like, I can remember the sewer pits, I can remember, the big party that Touche throws that for her storm mine crew, and the people that run the place didn't want her to run it there, so she books it through an agent, and it's little embellishments on the world almost rather than the plot.
Was it Padil, the sewer pits, the sewer pits terrorists who Leela sort of befriends? Does she befriend or whatever? I'm not quite sure. She's always certainly hangs around with.
Yeah,
I felt the big revelation that she's related to Landa Charles is supposed to be a big dramatic reveal. Thinking it's not set up very well, and Leela casually mentions it. And
yeah, it's a casual. Yeah, again, it comes back to this. The prose style not quite working, because there's a good story there, all the beats are there, but sometimes it's the dramatic elements that don't quite work, and Boucher hasn't figured out exactly how to write prose in that way, so I think it falls down a little.
Yeah, so I think it's very fair. So we could have got a little bit more knowing about Padil and her relation with the sewer pits, particularly once we know, so she's actually from the founding family, so it doesn't have this James N. Cain thing that, say, if you're reading The Postman Always Knocks Twice, and you read it, so you read it the first time around, and you get to the end, and they realise, spoilers, that, our main character is telling the story, is telling his story to a journalist because he's on death row for murder. And then, once you read that, read the book again, it informs how you read the book onwards. But you don't get that, is that big revelation of going, does this affect how I read the story? No, it doesn't. And it should.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have nothing else to say on it, we must rate it. Is it a clanger, a banger, or an average meander?
I would probably say it's an average meander.
Yes, I would agree. I didn't have a bad time listening to this at all. Would I be in a rush to revisit it? If I'm lying on my deathbed and someone says you can read one more Doctor Who book, I don't think it's this one, unfortunately.
No, I don't think it would be mine either.
Too hot for TV.
So the second thing we're going to look at is Storm Mine. This is a Doctor Who related audio play from Magic Bullet Productions. It's written by Daniel O'Mahony, directed by Alan Stevens and Alistair Locke, produced by Alan Stevens, and was released in December of 2004. News at the time: half of the episodes of Series 1 of Doctor Who, starring Christopher Eccleston, were in the can, and Brian Grant was announced as directing The Long Game, and the cast for Dalek had just been announced. Elsewhere, BBC Audio announced plans for a new range of MP3 CDs, remember those, entitled Doctor Who Reconstructed, and basically it was their Telesnap reconstruction, and they only released one, which was Power of the Daleks. And they also announced that the Doctor Who annual would return in autumn of 2005 for the first time in 20 years.
I do remember this was the BBC book range was beginning to wrap up. They'd gone from being 2 books a month to 1 book a month, and they flitted bi-monthly between EDAs and PDAs, except for the one which was an EDA and a PDA at the same time.
Exactly, and we were all very excited about a new series of Doctor Who, and it felt like it could be the only one. So the idea that somewhere there were sort of 6 new episodes of Doctor Who in existence was an exciting one. Other releases at the time, from Big Finish, we had The Next Life featuring the 8th Doctor, Charlie and Kerys, and Her Final Flight featuring the 6th Doctor and Perry, sort of. We also had the book Bernice, A Life in Pieces, and we had the audio unit Time Heals. Then we also had... with Doctor Who magazine, we had the audio of The Coup, which was a prologue for the unit release, and another Benny story, which was called Silver Lining. And then we had another set of books called A Short Trip's a Christmas Treasury, and the comic strip running at the time was The Flood. So yes, we're very much at the tail end of the Wilderness era, thank the Lord. Do you remember any of those at all?
I remember reading The Flood. No,
Yeah.
I thought it was a pretty good one, but it was clearly yes, this is getting from A to B now. This was the end game in process for the comic strip for Paul. Yeah, I've listened to, and again, I bought the Next Life. I was still subscribing to a Big Finish at that point, and again, the influence of the new series was feeding into the show. There is that they were wrapping up their Divergent arc a little prematurely. I understand that Scaredy Cat Timeworks were originally commissioned to be part of the Divergent arc, which makes me wonder, is that why Scaredy Cat is so bloody short, and how much was cut, and was it cut or was it just under running script? Yeah. And Timeworks is an interesting one because it clearly utilises time in a way it wouldn't normally, so that's clearly got its shadow from the Divergent universe there, but I don't think that one had been altered too much.
I can't remember anything about The Next Life, but I am doing it for the podcast later in the seasons. I look forward to revisiting it.
Well, it does have a mutual guest star with Stormline.
Well, hang on, who is that?
It's Paul Darrow. It's Paul Darrow.
Yes, wow. There we go. What a good link, and one I didn't even know was there.
Too hot for TV.
Blaze wakes up on a storm mine in the middle of the Blind Heart Desert. The storm mine is occupied by the Chief Mover, the Commander, and the unseen Chief Fixer, as well as numerous robots. Unfortunately for Blaze, Iago is also there, albeit as a voice inside her head. The rest of the crew were killed by robots who received Taran Capel's message some 18 months ago, and the survivors have been unable to return to Caldor City as the entire place has been quarantined. With the commander believing that they may be the only people left alive, suspecting all is not what it seems among the survivors of the storm mine, Blaze investigates and goes in search of the Chief Fixer and uncovers a dark power at work.
Too hot for TV.
So, are you a fan of the Caldor City range? Presumably you are, to get to the last one.
Yes, I quite enjoyed them. I purchased them, I'm going to say either 2016 or 2017. It was somewhat after, a long time after release, but in the meantime, previously I'd actually befriended Alan Stevens in person. And I just remember I was on Facebook, I thought, I'll buy these, and I bought the Faction Paradox, and I got a Facebook messenger from him saying, did you just buy a bunch of stuff from us? I said, yes.
I vaguely remember these coming out and being... I just wasn't interested for whatever reason, more for me. Or probably I had limited funds and you've got Big Finish and I'm still trying to get BBV stuff, and also, I am in my late teens, so I've discovered alcohol and things like that. and all of a sudden, that the 20-odd quid a month I was getting for pocket money had to go every which way. So I just ignored them. And then many years later, when I came to write my book about spin-offs, I was like, well, I've got to get these because I must cover them, and I expected them to be shit, and they were fantastic. I got so much love for this range, and I've since, because of that, I've befriended Alan Stevens, and I actually met him in person for the first time this year, where a very drunk man at a Doctor Who convention sat at my table, and I didn't recognise him, and then he said something, and I was like, is your name Alan? And I was like, I'm Dylan Reese, and he went, Dylan fucking Reese.
Yeah.
And then it gave me a big hug and then continued to call me Dylan fucking Reese over and over again for about an hour.
Did he call you a cunt?
Yeah, I think he did, yes.
Say cunt on this website. On this
webcast. Yes, absolutely. It's what Alan would want.
What? Yes, I can believe that. Yes, I've had some very interesting exchanges in person and in Messenger with him.
He's a wonderful, eccentric human being, very passionate about Caldor City and the things that he loves.
Oh, yes. I think it was somebody on Tachyon TV once described him as the man who could start an argument in an empty room.
Brilliant. So, presumably, this is the sixth one of the Caldor range. And the range sort of wraps up in the fifth one. So I'm guessing we were sort of in the same place of, did it need a sequel? Is this what you're expecting from a sequel? Like, where do we stand?
It's interesting. It's remade as a file, as a coder. I think it does it brilliantly. So I think he was thinking probably needs something extra rather than just that big dramatic downbeat ending. And it needs something to complement it. So maybe does need that little bit of a coda in the way that perhaps Robots of Death didn't need a sequel.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it is. You're right. It's a coda. It's not a sequel. It's not. I know it's a few years later or whatever, but they're not coming back to it. Going, we've got. We're gonna bring everybody back to life, and everybody's gonna There's gonna be a big heroic end. It's just here's a little bit more of that world, and it's got weirder.
Yeah, it's. Like I said, I compared it earlier to Fallout from The Prisoner, and to me it makes me think, oh, that sort of. We're just going out and out to do a finale, which is just tripping balls.
And trip balls it does. So how does it tie into the other plays in the range?
Well, there are spoilers abound here because it's impossible to talk about this without spoilers.
Yeah, we do spoilers here. Do you know what? I will say at this point, everybody knows we do spoilers. But if you haven't listened to the Caldor City range in full,
stop now. Come back when you've listened to it.
Shame on you all for also waiting this long. But yeah, go and listen to them. Magic Bullet website, they're still flocking them. Alan sells them all the time. If you follow him on Facebook, you'll know that.
Yes, he always makes a nice post every time he sells a copy. I think I've been tagged about a gazillion times now.
So how does it tie into these other plays? Where did we leave them towards the end of number 5 as well? I guess.
Well, at the end of number 5, everybody's dead. Everybody's dead. There's been a rift in time, which allows Yargo to go back in time, and you think, oh, he's going to save Blaze, but no, he goes back and gets attached to her. He kills her instead of somebody else because he can't stand the idea of competition. Which this little bit is recapped at the beginning. But what has happened is that Taron Capel has started a program which has turned all the robots in Caldor City into killers. And then, once the program runs through, they've gone back to normal. However, this has also created another problem in that it has created a field for the Fendal to return. And the Fendal apparently was embedded in Blaze and possibly Taron Capel himself in his skull, and the Fendal returns and destroys everything in Caldor City because the Fendal is death. And then we end up in this strange meta world, which is set on the Storm Mine. Which before I listened to it, I thought, oh, this is going to be a bit of a meta retelling of the Robots of Death.
Which sort of is in an inverted way, right?
It is, yes. And incidentally, it was also in a stage double bill with a version of the Robots of Death without the Doctor, with Blaze and Iago in place of the Doctor and Leela. I have no idea how that went or worked or... But maybe it's certainly interesting to read the script.
Yeah. Does the script exist for that?
I can always ask Alan if he's got a copy still.
It might even be the sort of thing that's on I bet it's on their website, you know.
It very probably could be. I could always drop a line to Alan or Fiona and find out.
I will give that a read, and if it's online anywhere, I will put it in the show notes when this comes out.
So what we have is a sort of suit. It's like a slightly reimagining of the familiar characters we have from Caldor City. In that we have, and from the Robots F, so we have the roles of the characters from Robots Dead. We have the Commander, Chief Mover, have the Fixer, which I assume was was Toose's role, or was that Dask's? Well, what we first have is we've got characters who are vaguely familiar in both characterisation and performance. So we have John Leeson doing a very similar performance to David Collins as Poole.
Yeah.
And we have late Philip Maddock. I wonder if he's standing in for Russell Hunter, because by the time they got to the Storm Mine, Russell had sadly passed.
Yeah, there's a possibility that had we had this, it would have been him. But they both do a great job in sort of bringing fresh energy, but also capturing the essence, I guess, of those roles in Robots of Death. And
that's a plot point, is that they are the essence rather than... So he says he's the commander. There's a line of, you're commander. Commander what? Yes, that's right. I'm the commander. nobody has a name. Everybody's just assigned a role.
Yes. including the people we never meet because they're not there.
Yes, like we have. And we have the only people with any names are the robots, which are S23, who's voiced by Jeffrey DePolony, who was D84.
Yes, and wonderful to hear him back.
Oh yes, it's a. Incidentally, my copy of Storm Mine was signed by him, so...
Excellent. It's Gregory DePolony, right?
Oh, Gregory, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Gregory DePolony, not George, sorry.
So, Blaze wakes up on this Storm Mine, and she's with Iago, except she's not. It's but it's very much told, it is a sort of first-person narrative from her point of view. Do we feel this works, especially like integrating Iago into that?
Yeah, so to me, it basically is Iago is basically her evil Jiminy Cricket. He's sitting on a little. You can see himself where he's there with his big laser going. Okay, Blaze, kill them all.
And for the first 5 or 10 minutes, I think it's not quite clear that it's the evil Jiminy Cricket. So there's a world where you think, oh, they've both survived this. Yes,
it does. It's not until you realise other characters start appearing and they don't mention somebody else. They realise, and he gives us 3 get-out clauses almost straight away as to why Iago's there, what is going on, and all 3 of them are probably slightly connected.
And so we've mentioned the guest cast, but are there any particular standout performances, like the regular? Like Blaze, we've had all series, and Iago, we've had all series. But is there any out of the guest cast are the standout performances, or are you just like the combination of them all?
I think the combination of all of them. I think John Leeson does a very good performance as a slightly slimy character who you're not quite sure what side he's on because he keeps changing his story and inflicting his opinion on what things are said. And when they talk about the conversation with the Dockmaster, he says, "Oh, she said we have to all pull together," and she actually says, "No, we're all in this together." He said, but what she means is this, and this is hinting that this is not quite the world we think it is.
I'm always pleased to see John Leeson doing another performance and getting to see him not being the tin dog. I know we get him in Power of Kroll, obviously, but this is like I do, like you say, is slightly slimy, slightly off. John Leeson as the chief mover is really like I was really. We all know Philip Maddock's going to do a good performance, like it's Philip Maddock. So, but to hear Leeson be sort of on par with that, it really goes to show like what good casting he was.
Yes, and then we have Philip Maddock, and he's weirdly obsession with the geology, which reflects Russell Hunt Yovanov's obsession with getting Lucanol. But it's slightly twisted because he's not interested in the profit; he's interested in the science, and how the desert works and how we're part of it. And there is this recurring theme of how we're all in this together, which slowly builds to the. Well, I would say it's slightly ambiguous, but it's quite rather obvious what's happened. But it's presented in a slightly ambiguous way. Again, much like the end of The Prisoner. So I wonder if the last episode of The Prisoner was in Alan's mind Alan or Daniel's mind when it was scripted.
Quite possibly. I mean, yes, there's I would say thematic links. Would you say?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
How does the character of the Chief Fixer play into this?
Well, the Chief Fixer is very much like number one, largely unseen, but manipulating events through aids and without being we don't really meet it to the very end. But he's an implied presence who seems to be controlling the crew, or at least the crew, at least basing their actions in terms to her responses or lack of responses. She's an absent guest at dinner. She's like the George and Margaret who never appear in Toymaker. She's
excellent. So how do we feel about Daniel O'Mahony's script, the sort of narrative concepts he plays with, themes, like weaving this into this coda that works for the rest of the series?
Well, it's a difficult job, and he does it very well. I think it's very. Well, I think it's quite a complicated setup, but I found it quite easy to follow, which can be particularly on audio. But if it gets too complicated, you can go, "What the fuck's going on? I've missed this when there's too much going on." So, because it does have a relatively large cast for an audio drama for about an hour long. But it's quite focused because we mostly focus on those principles of Blaze, Yargo, the commander, and the mover. So he plays it all well, and there's a good sort of interverse between Yargo and S23, the Blaze's assigned robot who seems to be commenting from the other side as to what Yargo is saying. They're going on. It's like there's the two oracles. One's good, one's bad. Although, depending on your point of view, one's bad and one's just less bad, maybe. Or
yeah,
it's a questionable morality. The world of Kaldor City has questionable morality anyway.
Indeed.
But it's strongly implied is that that V23 is the host for the new host for the Fendal, and the Fendal has found a new way. As we find out, the fixer, when the fixer finally turns up, is indeed the Fendal.
And obviously, this leads quite nicely into the end of the play, which can be interpreted in a number of ways. So I wonder which way how do you feel about the ending? Does it work? What do you think's happening?
Well, it's set up. It's a sort of dream matrix world where it's. Well, I think what has happened is that the various characters are all different aspects of the Fendal, and they've slowly absorbed into one. And but my reading is that Blaze has become that the robot has become the host, and Blaze has become the dominant personality in the Gestalt.
Yeah.
But the Fendal now doesn't know what it is. Not the Fendal. It's got a new sense of identity, and it's looking for doing something different. It's not just it's death by instinct. It's got more. It's gained awareness.
Yeah, and the thing for me about this is Blaze was part of an ensemble cast in Kaldor City, and probably not the one people show up for when you've got Paul Darrow. Let's face it, and we have Carnell and people like that in it, but. That in that ending, it's sort of implied that Blaze is something more than just another pawn in the game of the Fendal, of Kaldor City. You know, the Fendal calls her an enigma, and we're taking this character and placing them centre stage, not just for the play, but in the future of whatever resolution this sort of climax is coming to for the world of Kaldor, indeed the universe.
Yes, is the Fendal going to move on from Kaldor? Is it stuck there? Is it?
Yeah. And, you know, maybe there's a spin-off series that just shoots through the galaxy doing this to multiple worlds, playing these insanely clever games.
Yes,
sorry, go
on. We established quite early on in the Stormline that Blaze has the pentacle and the skull. But it's quite well seeded, the presence of the Fendal in the Kaldor City. Quite subtly, because there's lots of talk about the skull of Taran Capel, a fake one which appears in the second play, and so it's quite cleverly linked in, but not made obvious. And we have the cults in the Terranist in much the same way. Image of the Fendal, we have the coven,
and quite often in these sorts of stories, these Doctor Who spin-offs. And sometimes I sometimes feel a little bit rude calling something like this a Doctor Who spin-off when it goes so far into building its own world and building up. But sometimes within the Doctor Who spin-off worlds, we really miss the Doctor or a Doctor character. And do you ever get that feeling here? Are you even going, well, when's the Doctor going to show up and save the day and figure this all out?
No. If I'm going to go I'm perhaps going to go through this, I wouldn't really describe this as a Doctor Who spin-off. I think it's more of a Blake 7 extended universe spin-off.
Interesting.
is the characters feel more... the world of Caldor City you had presented this, I can see existing much better in the Blake 7 universe as opposed to the Doctor Who universe.
I think you're probably right. Now, to sort of hit back at that, though, could you see the Fendal? Does the Fendal work in Blake 7? Is there anything approaching Fendal-like in that world?
There's that alien in the sarcophagus, which also... It's the one which... I would say it's the alien which possesses Callie, but that probably doesn't really narrow it down very far, does it? It's in season C. It's the episode where it's just the regulars, and it's basically it's an alien who dies, but they live beyond their consciousness lives beyond their physical form, and they all have. And the crew are assigned various roles to which the alien had when she was alive. So you have the entertainer in the form of Villa. There was the warrior, Tarrant. For some reason, Dana's a singer for one episode only. But there is hints a lot of ideas of mysticism, and there's. And we do have great gods like the Farn, who turns out to be a man with a very strange shaped head. But
no, I can see what you mean about this sitting more in the world of Blake 7. But I guess it's because the iconography in terms of the robots and in terms of how you imagine everybody's dressed and things like that, it just feels like that world of Doctor Who. But you're right, tonally, it's a little bit more Blake 7. And I think, a lot of these spin-offs will have a pseudo-Doctor character. Here we have, maybe not so much in this one, although it is present. Obviously, we have a pseudo-Avon. Or is it Avon?
Well, you may think that, but nobody can possibly comment. You're definitely left to draw your own conclusions, because he does reference at one. Well, I did say that the rebel group he was in charge of got wiped out, and he nearly got killed himself if he didn't shoot out the lights before the guard shot him. So yeah, yes, you're.
Is that how he gets out of it in Logic of Empire? I can't remember.
It very possibly could be, because.
Alan Stevens is behind them all. If there's one man that's willing on Avon to survive, it was Alan Stevens.
Indeed, yes, I've heard a lot. When he was prepping some of his I Travis stuff, he sent me a few early edits of some of the plays, and I thought, yep, that's quite interesting. I'll say plays are mostly monologues, but but yeah, so yes, he's very much into the world of Avon.
The worlds of Avon. So what about Paul Darrow? Obviously, it's not his story here, but one thing I was interested in is that in the sort of genesis of this play, they thought that the story was done, but they shot around a few ideas and thought about doing a sort of anthology series set in that world, so it could have been set at any time. And the author Daniel O'Mahony pitched a Blaze story. And then Alan Stevens and Fiona Moore were like, no, we want you to turn this into the coda. And from there, it was them that said, no, we want Castan Iago in there here at some point, which again, is no mean feat because he was dead. So how do we feel about his involvement, his Jiminy Cricket involvement, and indeed Paul Darrow's performance?
I think it's a clever way to get around a problem of Blaze needs someone to talk to. Other than talking to herself. And there are ways to do that on radio, but it's easy to have someone to interact with. And it's so he works very well within that context of the other voice too, and just to make it sound a little bit more interesting, because there's only so much time as you can have somebody monologuing to themselves with other people occasionally turning up. But it also gives this extra aspect is that you can hang on, how come they can't hear Iago? So is he really there? Is he invisible, or are they just ignoring him? Are they all part of it, and they're gaslighting her to make her think that she's not there, that only she can see him? Is he not there? Is she hallucinating them, and he's the only one who's there?
Yeah, it's a fun little addition, and also I think perhaps if you're buying it and you don't know where it's going, you go, well, Paul Darrow's in it, so it's got to be a continuation of it. And then he starts, as you say, and you think he's there. But also, perhaps he's the buying point, because he was the star of the series, ultimately. And I doubt they'd ever try and do another version with Paul Darrow, and now sadly having passed away. I can't see a world where there's a Caldor City audio done now, because there just wouldn't be any point in not having.
No. I think it's like you were saying about the anthology ideas. A little bit of that exists on the Caldor City website. There's a couple of little pieces for Carnell and for Caston. And for Yargast to how he functions in this society twice after the timeline change.
And we get there's what's the one that's on? I think it's on the Actor Speaks or something like that. It's the Prisoner, which is Miles and Darrow after Darrow's broken into his house and Miles is interrogating him. That's it. It's been a while since I've heard it. I must go back and do the whole range, to be perfectly honest. So, look, is there much more you want to say on Storm Mine?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it, I think.
Excellent. Well, then we must rate it. Is it a clanger, a banger, or an average meander?
I think it's a banger.
It is an absolute banger. I love this range. Any excuse to come and revisit it, whether it's part 1, part 3, part 6, or a little bit of script for something that was never made. I'm just there. So it was... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the entire Caldor City range, I think there's only one which is really a bit weak, and that's probably the third one, Hidden Persuasions.
It's been a long time since I've heard them all the way through, but I remember enjoying them all. But who knows? Maybe when I go back, I'll be like, maybe not that one.
But I think that's because he got heavily rewritten. So I think maybe through the rewrites, it might have lost something out.
Right, I see. Well, a fantastic range, and if you are listening and have sat through all this and decided not to go and listen to it beforehand, again, go and listen to it.
Too hot for TV.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute blast to visit the worlds of Chris Boucher's Doctor Who.
Very nice to be here too, thank you.
If people want to find you on the internet, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter as @SandmanJazz. You can find me on Blue Sky. So I can never remember me Blue Sky, but it's basically look under Michael Storm. I think it's a variation of Sandman Jazz and Blue Sky. You can find me on Threads as the Sentimental Michael Storm, the Sentimental Sandman. You can find me on other social media, but that's going to be a challenge because you're going to have to find my real name for that. And my only hint is one of the reasons I use a different name for social media, which isn't work related, is I have the same name as someone who's written some Doctor Who books, factual Doctor Who books, and I don't want to be mixed up with him, or vice versa.
Excellent, okay. What a mystery to be solved there. Next time, it's a biggie. It's episode 100 of Too Hot for TV, and I'll be joined by my brother Jackson, and we'll be looking at the Big Finish audio, Death in the Family, followed by Tom Baker's autobiography, Who on Earth is Tom Baker? But until next time, I've been Dylan.
I've been Michael.
And this has been Doctor Who, Too Hot for TV.
Too hot for TV.
Ooh. Now, I'll cut that, don't you worry. Who was the fixer in... I might have to look this up. Sorry. These are the sort of things that get cut out. Sometimes people go, oh, you're really knowledgeable, and what they don't realise is there's 2 minutes of me Googling something that's been cut out.
So I was on Jason Miller's podcast, Doctor Who Literature, and we went on from talking to Mark and the Rani and how Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew had title books which are the titles, same titles as some Doctor Who stories, and he didn't believe me, so he googled them. So, yep, there's a Hardy Boys story called The Edge of Destruction, and a Nazi Drew story called The Twin Dilemma.
Brilliant.
But I don't think the Nazi Drew story has her strangling her best friend at any point. Or maybe it does.
Hang on. Who was the fixer? Was the fixer Paul?
No, Poole was the mover.
Of course, Chief Mover Paul. Do you know what? It doesn't say it in the cast. How annoying. Oh well. We'll carry on from there.